There's a lot of people pushing back on EdTech in the classroom these days. They've got good points, but is it possible to support both EdTech and accept the critiques? We're discussing how to be tech friendly during a tech backlash in this episode of the DIESOL podcast.
Welcome to the DIESOL podcast, where we focus on developing innovation in English as a second or other language. I'm Brent Warner, professor of ESL and author of EdTech for Multilingual Learners, amongst other things. And I'm here with Ishel Reyes, award-winning educator in innovation, professional development, specializing in teacher training. How are you, Ishel?
I'm doing great. It's spring.
It is spring.
How are you? You just got back from TESOL.
I did. And speaking of spring and TESOL, there were actually cherry blossoms in Salt Lake City around the Capitol building and all this stuff.
So
it was
lucky.
Cool. Yeah, it was cool to see.
So how was it?
Yeah, TESOL was great. Of course, people were asking about you as where's Ishel, all these things. So, sorry that you couldn't be there this year, but it was a lot of fun. Got to get to some good sessions. My session went well. It was full house.
I heard about that session.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun doing that, and I got really good feedback afterwards and everything. So I'm glad that went really well. There were other really good sessions too. I was glad to see there was a lot of sessions about advocacy, about supporting students through, like the war situation, of course, right? But, like conversations around things with local, things happening in America were also there as well. And so it wasn't, there was a lot of tech conversation, of course, right? It was going on. I will say one thing I was really bummed about, and no one's fault, but I mentioned this before too, was there was no sessions on vibe coding at all.
Really?
Yeah, nothing. And I think that's partly because it started to pick up a little bit of steam after submissions were due. So, I get it, right? That's probably fine, but at the same time it's oh my gosh. So I did a tiny bit of it during my session just to kind of show what's possible. But I think next year, if you want to get in,
next year everyone
everyone will do it if they're listening to this show and they're going to steal my my plan for the conversation. So we'll see what's going on. But anyways, it was great poster sessions. A few people that I think we're going to want to talk to in the future for sure. And next year we'll be closer to you. It'll be in Houston, right? So
yeah, I might be there.
Yeah, you
if
might
I'm
be
not
there
somewhere else in the world. If I can afford it. No, I will be. I hopefully will be there. That's close. Yeah. Anyway, you got to see some of our colleagues, so.
Yeah. I got to see see Mark Machina. I got to see Mary. I saw lots of people that
people
we
that
knew
inspire
from,
us.
From back in the day. People who give us good ideas. I didn't get to talk to all the people that I wanted to. Some people I saw in passing, and they were busy with other people, and then probably they saw me in passing when I was busy. So you know how these things go. Anyways, it was a good time. I really liked Salt Lake City too. I've never been there before, and or I've been there once, only passing through, and so it was kind of nice to be able to see a little bit of the city. It's really nice, and there's cool things happening all around. It's you have this image of it being a very conservative type of town, but it's actually kind of a real mix of all sorts of interesting things going on. So it was a kind of a nice surprise on that level.
Very cool.
But we're here today to talk about a different conversation, which is we're talking about EdTech stuff, right? and there has been, a pretty big, well, not big, but I don't know
you
how
call
big
it a
it is.
backlash.
It's a trending backlash, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's good, right? I think we need those pluses and minuses in the conversation all the time. And so right now, more and more research ideas are coming out around hey, we should really get rid of all tech in the classroom. That's kind of the extreme version of it. I think it's really easy to get caught up in that conversation. And there's a lot of the parts I think you and I both agree with. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, see what's kind of going on, and and maybe some approaches, because to me, I'm not like, well, I'm just going to throw away all the cool tech stuff that I'm using. And I also want to be able to say, well, what places could I make shifts? What places am I maybe just doing this because it's shiny and flashy versus really productive and useful?
And
so
is it effective?
Yeah, and
is it saving time?
Yeah, all those things.
Or
so
at what cost? Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Right it. Okay, so I looked at an article from this March 2026 by UNESCO. And so they recently said that phone bans in schools are spreading worldwide. And so you've probably seen the news about several states that are planning to implement such bans. And what they reported was that there's about 114 systems that educational systems that now have bans. That's like 58% of countries. They also mentioned that banning phones isn't really the full solution. Because schools are one of the few places where students can actually learn how to use tech properly. And that, of course, boils down to the teacher, boils down to how you're deploying a device and what kind of protections you have in place, what kind of training you're giving them or giving the teachers and the students. And basically learning how to use the tech properly. Evaluating information, managing the screen time, which I know you've been doing for yourself as an adult, and understanding the risks.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a lot into all of this, right? I think we've seen Australia or parts of Australia that are banning a lot of tech, and these can be different, right? Like some of them, the conversation might be around more things like, elementary school students up to middle school students, things like that, right? There could be high school and college. I am seeing the conversation, right? Of course, there are teachers who say no tech in my college classroom, and that's fine too. You just kind of have to sort out, I just want to be careful. It's really easy to go, okay, well, this is a study that happened for a small group of second graders, and I'm going to apply that to my adult education classroom. Well, okay, and let's recognize that there's context for all of these different things. So things we want to just pay attention to.
And so to that end, UNESCO also, if you're out there listening and you want to see what the actual data says, there was a report by it's GEM, which is a Global Education Monitoring Report. And that is actually from 2023. And it's got a proposal for deploying technology in education. So if you don't know where to start, or you're going back to that conversation of what are we doing? Are we doing it effectively? That's a place that you might want to check out. Of course, we'll have it in the show notes.
Great.
And then I looked at an article in the BBC. The article is of Dutch schools, which talks about a ban that happened 2 years ago. So they banned mobile phones, smartwatches, tablets. And so again, 2 years ago. And the question is, has banning phones improved performance at Dutch schools? And so we want to take a look to see what's been happening. And I think that's a great example. They instead of making a law, they had sort of a national agreement with schools, parents, and teachers, and that actually led to a faster buy-in rather than a lot of political back and forth and political friction. And what's interesting in that article is that they had several students talking about how they felt about the ban. And you've got different high school students saying like, what up? At first they were angry because they couldn't check their social media. But then eventually after they got bored, they found something else to focus on. And also this ban was also implemented at school social functions and during the breaks, which meant at lunchtime or at break time, the cell phones had to be in lockers. Or they could be, I think they either got confiscated or maybe they could get in trouble. I didn't see how that was being managed by the schools, but students said it helped them to be less less worried about possibly being photographed and their pictures being uploaded to social media platforms like Instagram and TikTok, which, again, if our students are worried about pictures being manipulated or their images being uploaded without their permission, that actually has a big impact on their social emotional development. And if they're worried, then they're not going to focus. So it's worth a read. And again, it's a recent one, and I have a feeling we're going to be looking at more reports or similar reports from children. Of course, there are some that where students are like, well, we don't really like it, but they're not infringing on our rights or anything. So they understood.
Yeah,
they understood.
Well, we gotta give students credit for, like, I mean, it's so easy to kind of play it off and be like, oh, you don't know what's best for you. We know what's best for you. And it's like, actually, a lot of these students do. Like, yes, of course, they might make bad decisions, but if you talk to them and if you involve them in the conversation, for sure, there's a lot of things that can work out really well there. So, yeah, I think we will also see some more of this too with so much of the AI videos being able to be made because could you imagine, like, oh, some student who doesn't like you and they like record you, but then they make an AI version of it where it's like you're saying slurs in the classroom or something like that, right? And then you have to go and defend yourself against something that's totally made up, right? I could see a real fear around that, and you never know who might do something like that, right? Like, so like you just have no control over what's going on with the way other people do those things. So, so I could absolutely see that as a problem.
Yeah, and nowadays you have like the current backlash with the Ray-Ban Meta glasses.
Yeah, tell me a bit about that.
So the thing is that you don't really know when they're recording, and so they actually look like glasses. You would never, unless you were familiar with the type of frame and the way they look, someone wouldn't know that they're recording. And essentially you could be live recording everything and uploading to the cloud right away. I do have a colleague who has them, and he uses them to listen to music because you can listen to music while you're using them. And I think that's nobody knows that he's listening to music. But it's a little bit creepy that I don't know when it's recording, or that I could suddenly start acting differently if I feel like it's recording. And to have that.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be honest. Yeah, I mean, Meta is absolutely a surveillance company, right? Like they're just spying on you all the time. So so in theory, they could just decide, well, I just want these to be on, and I want passive data to be just trickling up.
Oh, and that's the thing. You just reminded me. I think there was an article out there where the people looking at I don't want to get this wrong, but the people the people that are managing the data to learn from what people are uploading have seen images when the glasses were not being worn, but the camera, and you know where that could go.
Yeah.
So that was, some of the just creepy stuff around it. Google Glass got rid of all Google Glass. I don't know what's going to happen because other little, cheapy versions are out there now, and
yeah, I mean, this tech is so much easier to do now than it was when Google Glass came out. And of course, I mean, you had that, Ishel. I mean, I gave you a little bit of a hard time back then, but like you were playing with it and of course exploring.
So my students were recording, and I was letting them use it. I wanted to see what kind of exchange, like English exchange, would happen.
But it was interesting.
Didn't.
Oh, okay.
It was interesting. Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it wasn't like glasses. You can obviously see, and you can see when it's recording, so that's different. But the other thing I was going to say, also in going back to the Meta glasses, a student was accused, I believe, of cheating with them. The person on the other end could hear the questions or could see the questions, one of those two, and was feeding responses.
Yeah, I mean,
something like that. Yeah, but
for sure, of course, like that's going to happen, right?
It was the same thing with Bluetooth speakers in the ear speakers.
That's right. Yeah,
there were cases.
There are cases, there are things. Just from keep in mind, these things can easily happen. So, but then my hard part about that is with those glasses is like it could be prescription glasses, right? So,
Yeah.
so it's like, hey, these are my only glasses, so you can't ban me from wearing these in class either, right? Whole other part of the conversation, right? I think today, like, it's just interesting to kind of recognize many parts of the tech kind of overlap, and even though it's not the same thing, it's easy to say, well, I just want no tech in my classroom. Right. And so like, I don't want any of this stuff. I just don't want to have to deal with it. And so let's get rid of it all. Right. And then there was an article also in the Times, the New York Times, called "The Screen That Ate Your Child's Education." That came out back in November of last year, right? And so I thought it was really interesting. A colleague of mine shared it with me. There was some really interesting points inside of there, just kind of worth looking at and recognizing that, there are real problems with a lot of these things. So we'll cover a couple of them. I think one of the points that said that there was like 300,000 fourth and eighth grade students, a study of these students, right, found that the students who spent more time using digital devices in language arts classes. Now, that's not, my understanding of that means English, right? Not English language acquisition or
Right.
language courses, but language arts classes performed worse on reading tests.
And that's like the predictor for a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
Performance.
All
reading.
sorts of things, right? So like, what are your reading skills, etc., right? And then there was and Ishel, I think you'll like this one. Inside of that article too, they said that there's a meta-analysis that found that reading on paper compared with reading digitally led to significantly better comprehension among students from elementary school to college. So what do you think about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't like digital books, and I've always felt very strongly that you need to be able to feel that page in your hand, and you need to be able to flip back and forth to compare things. And especially when you're a language learner, which even younger students are learning a language too, you need to be able to process information differently. And even back in our USC days, I want to say 2014-ish, there was some, and I'm sure this has been quoted or we've talked about it someplace, where college students who were taking notes digitally versus the ones who were taking notes physically, they didn't retain more or did better on the test. They actually did worse. And so it's kind of, I think those two go hand in hand.
Yeah, that study is kind of involved in here. Again, we'll give the links to the article so you can find the information about it, and we'll talk more about the handwriting thing in in the second half of the show. But again, absolutely worth paying attention to and looking at, right? And saying, well, does this, is the digital version of this really the best choice? For me, the tactile, we talked about this, I think, in the past too. Like, if you remember when you were younger and you're reading books, or even now, right? Like, you're like, oh, where was this? And you have a sense of like how much you pinched the book, like how many pages in you were, right? That is gone with a digital version, right? You're like, oh, I just have to kind of keep swiping through and looking for it, or searching for keywords, I guess. But there's something to it being like, oh, like I have a physical connection to actual physical connection to this reading. So, worth looking at, worth paying attention to. And then the last little bit from that article, they mentioned that in countries like Japan, where students spend less than half an hour on devices for leisure during the school day, academic performance has remained fairly steady, especially in math and science. So
Yeah.
Something to pay attention to, right? And so there's a lot to look at here, and we're kind of talking about the what the studies are saying and kind of the negative points, but we'll poke a few holes in it and deal with that in the second half of the show.
Excellent.
All right. So, Ishel, are you coming to Japan this summer with me?
I will be there in spirit, but you're going to be in Japan just in a couple months.
Yeah.
Jolt.
At Jolt Call. So 2026, Friday, June 12th to Sunday, the 14th.
I want to be there.
Yeah, it should be cool. I'm really looking forward to it. I spend most of my time in Japan in Kobe, and this is
Where are you going to be this time?
so it's the same area. So it's Nishinomiya, which is right, halfway between Kobe and Osaka. And the theme is prevail or fail, which is good, kind of connecting to this conversation today. Right? Yeah.
Survive or die.
Right. And so today's conversation kind of matches up with a little bit of that. But I want to invite everybody listening to join us as well.
Yeah. So if you're in Japan, you can go there. You're going to have a blast.
Awesome.
Brent, you're also going to be interviewed.
I already was interviewed. Yeah. So for the Jolt Call podcast, I got they did an interview with me. We had a conversation about it. So it's kind of preparation for it, for the conversation, that we're doing. And so if you're interested in hearing that a little bit more, some of the things we cover on the show, but a little bit more. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like, hey,
if you missed Brent at DIESOL,
listen to more of my voice, right? But anyways, it's great. So thank you to everybody over at Jolt Call, and if you want to hear that interview, I thought it was a good conversation, and we were able to talk about some kind of little customized focused around Japan and some of my experiences with those bits. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on there, and please check it out.
Okay, and we'll have the links in the show notes.
We will. All right, last bit. So we shall here we looked at some of the problems. We looked at some of the research that are focusing on some of the problems, and I really do think it's a good thing to get on board, look at them, but it's also worthwhile to beware of the temptation to take it to the extreme, right? Because
we don't want to be one or the other.
Yeah, I mean, it's like so many people, it's like they see this stuff and they're just like all out, right? Let's get rid of all our things. Let's get rid of everything, and we're just going to go back to the old paper and pencil version of things. And it's like, okay, but let's be more thoughtful than that, right? Because it's the same problem with going all in, right? Like, hey, we don't just want to be doing this pendulum swing all the time. We want to be doing what's best for our students.
And research-based, data-driven. We need to look at what actually what the research says, and then figure out where our balance is.
That's right. So we have some reasons, some things to think about, and some ideas. So Michelle, what are some of the things you've been thinking about?
Well, I think you and I go back and forth all the time on this because we're definitely advocates for innovation with technology in education. But oftentimes we forget that tech is the only way that some students get access to information. And if you have a student with special learning needs, blind, for example, assistive technology is a huge boost to supporting them in developing autonomy in their learning.
That's right.
Otherwise, they're going to need an assistant all the time, which is an expense that many people can't afford or districts can't afford, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just get rid of everything. You'll be leaving out a huge number of the population, of our student population.
And it's also worth pointing out that, like, English language learners are way less likely to self-identify as needing help, right? And so this is a struggle we're dealing with on our campus because currently the laws come into the federal laws coming into place that everything needs to be made accessible, right? And so we've got these teachers that are kind of pushing back on it and saying, well, we don't, this is blah blah blah, whatever. And it's like, because I don't think I have any of those students in my class, and I've said the same thing for sure. So I want to be careful. Like I'm not like blaming people for thinking that way, because it's like I often feel that I'm like, am I really going to spend all this extra time for an imaginary student that's not really there? Well, guess what? They're probably not imaginary. They're very likely to be in your classes and not identifying or telling you about it. And with an attitude like that, then they're less likely to identify, right? And so you want to recognize that. And so one, you can say, hey, even things just like screen readers and technology can be a huge support for everybody. But I also would connect it to things like open educational resources, right? Because, a lot of schools can afford to say like, hey, we've got a laptop loan program. Not every school, I totally understand that, right? And it really does depend. But, maybe, hey, a student can't afford it, but we can find a way for them to get something. So if you're doing an open educational resource that's, digital in there, and a student has a laptop or some sort of digital device, they can now get access to your text for free. That's, part of the whole game of of everything, and it's accessible, for different readers' needs, for different accessibility needs as well. And a lot of students, they just can't afford the traditional textbooks, right? So if you're in college, university, whatever else it is, even in high school, I hope OER is moving more towards high school as well. But like, you don't need those traditional textbooks. That can cost you hundreds of dollars, right?
Even renting them is expensive.
And so, it's like, let's take a look at that thing. And if we're saying, hey, this is actually a place where technology can really help people, maybe we want to look at that, right? And so I would just be not so quick to say that, like, hey, we're just going to get rid of everything, because think about who you're leaving out when you make that decision as well, right?
And then, Brent, you had mentioned a post by Matt Miller.
Yeah. So just today, I think this actually came from today or yesterday as we were preparing our notes. I'm like, oh, Matt wrote about this exact topic on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I'm sure he shared about it elsewhere, but he had a few different things, and he talked about our conversation from earlier about the backlash of taking notes digitally versus on paper. So really interesting. He had a really thoughtful. Matt's always thoughtful about how he presents his information, and he kind of said, well, let's look at this. He said, yes, absolutely, this is a real problem. The distraction's a real problem, but also like the note-taking thing, like the hand-taking notes versus typing notes, right? He said most of the research about the hand-taking notes is about lecture classes in higher education, right? And so like that's where the research often comes from, and it's like cool, and many times that will be valuable, but you can't necessarily just extrapolate that to say every learning situation is going to be better in this way than in that way, right? And so he said just wanted to be careful about it. And I also appreciate that in the notes inside of there, Ken Shelton, who also does some cool stuff, he did lots of cool stuff. He followed up by pointing out there's also issues like, well, do we know what the instructional design, was it intentional and helpful for the students, or are these just kind of traditional, lecture classes that maybe weren't the best designed anyways to begin with, right? So it's just like, yeah, let's push back on the all tech for any sake, but let's not push back on any tech for whatever sake, right?
Yeah.
So just to be a little bit careful about that.
Yeah, and I think as a teacher trainer, with teacher trainees from different places around the world, I have to, number one, always consider who my audience is for that cohort of teachers and what they're going to have available in their own institution. So if I'm teaching them everything that I'm doing with, I don't know, Notebook LM, for example, they may not even have access to that. So why would I be showing them all these things and dangling it in their face when they can't actually go back and apply it? Like, for personal use, great, but I want them to be effective teachers, right?
Right.
And creative, and I want to boost their innovation and creativity. So I have to recognize which students are going to benefit from the different strategies I'm going to demonstrate. And if my students come from a place where they're supported and they've got technology available for them and accessible, then of course I'm going to encourage that. So I always have to figure out, okay, my group's going to be mixed. I'm not going to have just the people using tech and the people not using tech or with no tech available. I always have to balance it out. And I make sure to tell them, think about how we're going to substitute this when you're in a low tech to no tech environment, because the only tech you might have is Post-it notes. Okay, well, you don't need to use Miro. You don't need to use any digital slides without a projector. All you need is Post-its. And so again, I'm encouraging that also for the teachers that do have tech, because if they're working with students who learn by manipulating things, then they have to get out of just sticking to the projector and just sticking to the smart board, because that alone is not necessarily effective for every learner. And we're trying to reach as many learner styles as possible.
Right. Yeah. So like I saw some recent presentations and I saw some teachers showing things, and it was like, okay, I've got my Google Slides up here and I'm moving through the slides with the information. And then they're like, okay, well now I want to shift it over to a like a
Padlet.
yeah, Padlet or a Mentimeter or whatever else it is, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, but like when you move it over there, you're still only showing information, right? You're not using it in a way that is unique to that platform. You're still just showing slides. So for example, maybe someone has like a word cloud that they had built previously on Mentimeter, and it's like, well, do you need to go to Mentimeter to show that, or can you just screenshot it and put it into your slide deck?
Screenshot
right?
it.
Yeah, like and little things like that, and they're like, "Oh, here's the code," and then I have to log in and do all these. It's like, well, think carefully about your processes and like what are you actually trying to get going here, because that could also lead to burnout where students are like, oh, okay, wait, what's going on here? What's happening with this next piece, right? And so you want to be a little bit careful about that. But then also, I several years ago I pushed for getting 360 whiteboards in almost all of our classes in the ESL department at our campus, and it's gone really well, right? Like I've seen other teachers using them when I walk by, some of them really effectively, and then but it's like, hey, let's step away from the tech. Let's recognize that an analog world offers really excellent things, and you don't have to purposely point it out. It just becomes integrated into the environment, the learning environment that you're in, right? So a lot of these things are things we want to think about. And then I didn't plan this part, but I also want to say, like, online learning is a huge thing, and it offers so many benefits to so many students who can't get access to information otherwise. Every single thing you're going to do in an online learning environment by default is going to be some sort of digital thing, right? So some of us are privileged to be able to say, well, I'm just going to go back to pen and paper, but it's like, well, but like, look at all the students who miss out on an education because you choose to say that they can't come to your class, they have to come to your class in person, all these different things, right? And so and by the way, I have in-person classes. I have the benefit of saying that easily, right? So it's just things to consider, and things that I want people to pay attention to.
That reminds me, you're talking about the 360 whiteboard. And I recently was doing a demonstration on the board on how to use a visual strategy to teach superlatives and comparatives to language learners for my teachers. And I had this beautiful like drawing on the board, and someone came in and said, "Can I take a picture? You have beautiful notes." And I just thought that's just so simple, but we're so used to the smart board, and I've even had people say, "Can you do that on the smart board?" Like, no, I know I have to rewrite it and redo it, but there's a purpose and there's a reason why I'm using the regular whiteboard. I want you to see as I'm drawing how I'm constructing and what I am, what the self-talk is, because I want you to mimic that. It's not, I don't want you to just snap a picture of a slide. So I've got, and I have to go back to my teachers and tell them there is a reason why I want the students to go to the board and not just, the smart board. If you have a piece of paper, I want them to physically do something, and I want to hear the talk. I want to hear, we look for the verb, we circle the whatever. And again, I want them to internalize that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the end of that rant. And all that to say that tech can do a lot of things that you can't do otherwise. Recording voices and videos on the fly at, free or no cost. Developing games and activities that respond to you whenever you use them. It can do a lot of that. So, I mean, I'm telling you, I still use Vocaroo, and it still does the one thing.
We love Vocaroo. We should start sending. We should get Vocaroo to be our sponsor.
No, we want
with the 0 cents they make and the 0 cents we make, we'll just send love over their direction. But yeah, 100%. Like this is a big deal, right? Is like, part of the joy of tech is to really explore the things that you can't do otherwise, right? And so it's like so many of these ed tech companies have just kind of replaced, like when we're talking about the the old SAMR model and things like that, it's just like all replacement. It's like, well, why? But let's talk about not replacing. Let's talk about transformation and really making things that are really interesting and couldn't be done in another world. And I think a lot of people lost sight of that, especially with COVID and just trying to get through, right? And
then there's like tons of cloned tools that are just
boring, right?
Boring.
Yeah, for sure. And so, like, use a little creativity. You can figure out some cool ways to use many of them. So, but like, if you're just using them in the flat way that they're presented, and you're like, okay, well, you know, and then students go, oh, okay, yet another Kahoot, right? Yet another Kahoot filled with tons of. I mean, that we were talking about this pre-show, but like, what is going on with that Kahoot?
Every time I open that teacher page,
yeah,
like. No, I can't say what I want to say.
Well, I think you can say what you want to say, right? I mean, it's
like someone just barfed out icons.
Yeah, I mean,
they're everywhere.
Like, okay,
organization
let me share this here just for anybody who's watching it. If you haven't seen Kahoot's homepage in a while, if you're just going straight into your work, like, this is what it looks like, right? I mean, it's like massive, and it's just covered with tons of junk, and it's really hard to get through. And that's not even the logged in page. Like, if I log in and try to go and see what's actually happening with this, let's see if I can get in real quick here. I know this makes for thrilling podcasting, but like, if you go in and look at that Kahoot page, you can see like it's just loaded up with tons of gunk, and like, what is this for? What am I trying to do with all of this? Things on the
side, things at the top, things in the center, whatever. All these dashboards, do you really need them? Simplicity goes a long way. So I don't even make Kahoots because it gives me a headache to try to figure out where to go, what to click. Like, do I really need this? Do I want this?
Look at all this stuff, right? And so, and then all these platforms are moving. It's like, we're adding new features. It's like, okay. And I'm a little worried about Padlet, to tell the truth, right? Like, because it's like, because they're adding more, and some of them are cool, but some of them I'm like, okay. Like, are we getting into the same thing where it's like we just provide all things for all purposes? And I think that's not as valuable as
just do the one thing you do well, and don't add all the bells and whistles, because they're not bells or whistles.
All right. So lots to think about, but again, recognize the backlash is real, and there are really good reasons not to use tech in many situations, but also there are really good reasons to use tech in other situations, and be thoughtful with it, right? Think about your students, what they're going to learn, what they're going to get out of it, not just, here's a shiny toy, let's play with it for no purpose at all.
All right, it is time for our fun finds.
Hey.
Today I have an article of clothing. So if you're listening, you'll have to go to YouTube to see my beautiful red and gold Egyptian scarf.
Ooh.
That came all the way from Egypt. So to the person who made this possible, shukran. And it's got these cool, you can't see them if you're listening, but it's got famous hieroglyphs in gold, and it's beautiful. Everybody knows my favorite color is red and black, and this is a gorgeous scarf. So
really,
what do you have?
Yeah.
Aren't you jealous?
I am jealous. So I also then have something that goes over your shoulders, which is a backpack. So Michelle, I don't know if I'm sure I talked about this on the show back then, but last year my backpack got stolen. My computer got stolen when I was at a conference. And I bought this backpack, the Jester backpack from the North Face. And that's the one that got stolen. And I had gone back to try and buy it again at REI, I think, and it wasn't there. And I thought it was discontinued. So anyways, for the conference, I was like, I still need a little travel backpack, not my heavy big one. I need something that I can kind of do for day carries. I went back to REI and they had it again in stock. And so I bought it again. It is the perfect size for me. It's like, it's not too small. It's not too big. It holds my big old water bottle, but also, a fair amount of things inside without getting too heavy or weighed down.
All the gadgets.
So, yeah.
All the dongles.
Well, all the stickers I had to bring.
All the stickers, patches.
So anyways, it's just a nice backpack. I know everybody has their own personal needs for what they're looking for and all those things, but it's kind of a good combination between, you go around the city commute, you could do light hiking with it. It's got the bungee cords on the back, so like you can strap your shoes or your sweatshirt into outside without having to carry that around. So anyways, really nice backpack.
The price point is good. from what I see right
Yeah,
here.
yeah. This one that I got, the
backpack?
kind of orangish one, $75.
You
They
did
have
get the orange one. I was gonna ask that.
yeah,
Did you
yeah,
get
yeah.
the
That's
diesel orange?
I did. I gotta put the patch on it next. But
Yes.
anyways, yeah, good backpack. And really great for conferences and things like that. So if that is your jam, check it out. Try it on first before you buy it. Don't just go buy it on my recommendation. Make sure it's a fit for you. But
Yeah.
I like that one, the Jester backpack from the North Face.
Cool. For the show notes and other episodes, check out diesel.org/135. You can find us on YouTube. You can watch us on YouTube. Find us on Facebook sometimes. And you can definitely find us on Instagram at DieselPod on most platforms.
That's right.
You can find Brent still,
Yeah.
I think.
Sometimes, yeah, at Brent G. Warner. Definitely on LinkedIn at Brent G. Warner.
Yeah.
Sometimes on Instagram.
And you can find me on Instagram at ixy_pixie_. That's IXY_PIXY_.
All right. So thanks everybody. We hope this episode has helped you out a little bit, giving you some food for thought. A little. I don't think it's a challenge to the flat. I think it's just kind of like let's keep a rounded conversation on everything.
Yeah.
So
Balance is the key.
balance is key. So thank you so much for listening to the Diesel Podcast, and we will see you in the next episode. Bye.